People tend to associate multilateralism with institutions, right? With the United Nations or with the Bretton Woods institutions, because those are the vehicles through which the international cooperation actually happens, right? But for me, I think that multilateralism is more about international cooperation. It's about countries and actors that operate in different parts of the world coming together to solve common challenges. Or coming together to address challenges and disputes and issues that they see together. One of my favorite examples goes back 160 years, right? I think it's May 17th, 160 years ago, that you had this new innovation, which was the telegraph. And there was a problem. The problem was it was working well within borders, but how would you actually send a telegraph across from one nation state to another nation state and be able to use the same technology and the same wiring and make it easy and efficient? And so 20 countries came together in Paris and they said, we've got to form something that gets us together. And they formed something called the International Telegraph Union, right? The ITU. And that is a really good example of, like, we've got an innovation. We know it's going to make our lives better. It's going to make us communicate better. It's going to allow us to have dialogue with one another. But unless if we standardize a few things, it's not going to work. And so they came together, formed this union, and that union is still active today. They call it the International Telecommunications Union now, or the ITU. And that's where internet protocols and why we're having this Zoom or this conversation over virtual platforms is possible, because those protocols are negotiated at the ITU. So that's a really tangible example of why international cooperation is important, why it dates back centuries, and how it makes all of our lives easier. So you can translate that example to various different other forms of our life and other areas that make our lives easier. So for example, traveling from one country to another, you've got to get on a plane, you've got to go through immigration, and you trust that all that works. You trust that your passport is going to identify you and that the other country is going to respect what's in your passport. You trust that when you get on the plane, it's going to follow the rules and take off and land, and you know where you're going. But all of that is part of a global framework that negotiates and that agrees on the standards and the processes. And that's multilateralism in its very normal sense. I think we always think about multilateralism more when we're talking about war and peace and like major issues and summits. But the reality is, like, our day-to-day life, the mundane, the boring stuff is also heavily defined by countries collaborating, and that makes all of our lives better.